Hi, this is Deanna Anderson from Drama 30. I was fortunate enough to be able to interview Dr. Katherine Johnson about her experience with Latina and Latino youth. Dr. Johnson is a public school teacher and has been for 17 years. She has her master's degree in English in teaching with an English language focus, and has her doctorate in education, and her dissertation was about the perception of Latinas on factors influencing their education. So I was very lucky to be able to have an interview with her. We discussed a lot of things. One of the first things that we brought up was immigration and how this affects the kids. Most kids that they see in the public school system are not immigrants themselves. A lot of the times their parents are, but the children were actually born in the United States, particularly in California. So we began by discussing immigration as it affects the students. Most of them are not foreign born. Most students today are actually born in America, while their parents were born in Mexico or Central America. When there are illegal immigrants involved, the teachers are actually not allowed to do anything with that information. If they, for some reason, find out about a family or a student's immigration status, they can't do anything. Of course, that never prevents anything, anybody from doing something illegal, but overall there are protections in place. Now, of course, that doesn't always mean anything as far as communication between student and teacher goes. People aren't aware that there are these protections in place. And a lot of the times, by the time they reach 8th grade, which is the level that Dr. Johnson teaches at, the students, they know, they've figured out that their immigration status is something that can have very dangerous consequences for their family, and so they don't communicate. Sometimes this can have negative effects on the teacher-student or teacher-parent relationship, but it's just one of the factors. And I asked her about this, and she actually cited a cultural difference between teacher and parent in Latin American countries as being the kind of top contributor. There's an attitude that the teacher is always right, even if the parents disagree with them. And so they don't want to come forward if they have any kind of problem, because they just kind of assume that no matter what, the issue is that the teacher is going to be right in that. There is also sometimes a factor of the parents thinking maybe if they complain too much that something will happen, somebody will report them. And of course, you're not supposed to do this, but that doesn't stop people from being quote-unquote dicks, as Dr. Johnson said. So my next question for Dr. Johnson was regarding what she's currently teaching. She currently teaches half-time at Delta Vista Middle School to 8th graders. She teaches English. And she talked about one of the books that she's planning on starting as the new school year starts. It's called The Circuit by Francisco Jimenez. And she really enjoys doing this book. She's done it before. It is about it's an autobiography about a migrant farm worker and his family's journey of coming into the country illegally in the 1940s. And she really enjoys doing this book because oftentimes this is the first time in their educational career that these kids have seen the main character in a book, whether that's a true book, a history book, or a fictional book that they have to read for school, or even for pleasure, that looks like them, that has a story that's like their families. And it's the first time that they sort of are able to become an expert in the classroom. She talked about the journey that these students have throughout the book. Now, most of the time, her Latino students are very quiet as they begin this book. They don't contribute much in their journals or in class. But by the time they reach the middle of the book and she's established what she's trying to do, she's established that she isn't going to come at this topic with a conservative point of view, with this is bad kind of view, and the students finally feel safe and feel encouraged to speak their mind. Happens about the middle of the book. And they finally start speaking out. She mentioned at one point last year, she had a Latina student who, once they got to that point, and she came up to Dr. Johnson and said that her mother was a farm worker, and was a migrant farm worker for much of the year. And she asked if her mother could come in and speak to the class and tell the class about what she does, because she felt so safe in this environment that had been provided. And that this is something that kind of, it has to be nourished in a classroom and in a discussion. Oftentimes there's a major language barrier between Latino students and everyone in some cases. Either they're Americanized and they forget their Spanish that they may have grown up with. Oftentimes grandchildren end up not being able to communicate with grandparents because they, through the education system that tries to Americanize them, have forgotten their Spanish. They don't get a chance to practice it. They don't speak it at home. And they've lost touch with the older generations. Of course, the opposite can also happen. In the United States, students who immigrate to the United States have to be enrolled in school immediately and begin their education so long as school is in session. Dr. Johnson discussed an experience that she had when she was teaching at elementary school. They had a track system, and green track was the track that had bilingual education. None of the other tracks had Spanish-speaking teachers, instructional aides, translators, but this girl had arrived when green track was on their vacation. So she got put in Dr. Johnson's class, and Dr. Johnson isn't bilingual. Like I said, this girl was put in class because she was legally forced to, and essentially had to sit and do nothing for 3 weeks while she waited for the green track to come back to school. We have an archaic education system that oftentimes tries to Americanize and then doesn't give any consideration to what we're doing. Thank you. These students are offered 180 days of education in their native language. After that, after one school year, they are required to take all English classes while they are still in ESL, English as Second Language. This is despite the fact that these students are trying to learn a language academically, which takes 9 to 10 years to develop the ability to learn and communicate at an academic level. 180 days is all right for the very basic language, being able to talk to each other on the playground. But these students are being expected to keep up with their studies while they're being instructed in a language that they don't understand. And this 180 days is only offered if the school can provide it. If a school doesn't have the resources to provide these 180 days of Spanish-speaking classes, they don't have to. So I know a lot of people are actually just posting their interview, but I thought I'd do this and kind of synthesize and give a brief summary of what I discussed with Dr. Johnson. A very brief summary, because for the 10-minute interview that I wanted to get, I got 40 minutes worth of tape. So if you want to hear more, because it's a pretty fascinating discussion, and obviously being the expert, she explains it better than I can. I'll post the link to that 40-minute YouTube video, and thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your summer!